OSTLER JOE by George R. Sims. I stood at eve as the sun went down by a grave where a woman lies who lured men's souls to the shores of sin with the light in her wanton eyes, who sang the song that sirens sang on the treacherous lily height, whose face was as fair as a summer's day, and whose heart was as black as night. Yet a blossom I fain would pluck today from the garden above her dust, not the languorous lily of soulless sin, nor the blood-red rose of lust, but a sweet white blossom of holy love that grew in one green spot in the arid desert of Francois, where all was parched and hot. In the summer, when the meadows were aglow with blue and red, Joe, the ostler of the Magpie, and the fair Annie Smith were wed. Plump was Annie, plump and pretty, with cheek as white as snow. He was anything but handsome, was the Magpie ostler Joe, but he'd won the winsome lassie that a cottage and a cow, and her matronhood sat lightly on the village beauty's brow. Sped the months, and came a baby, such a blue-eyed baby boy. Joe was working in the stables when they told him of his joy. He was rubbing down the horses, and he gave them then and there all a special feed of clover, just in honor of the heir. For it had been his great ambition, and he told the horses so, that the fates might send a baby who would bear the name of Joe. Little Joe, the child, was christened, and like babies, grew apace. He had his mother's eyes of azure, and his father's honest face. Swift the happy years went over, years of blue and cloudless sky. Love was lord of that small cottage, and the tempest passed them by. Passed them by for years, then swiftly burst in fury over their home. Down the lane by Annie's cottage chanced a gentleman to roam. Thrice he came and saw her, sitting by the window with her child, and he nodded to the baby, and the baby laughed and smiled. So at last it grew to know him. Little Joe was nearly 4, and he would call the pretty gimlem as he passed the open door. And one day he ran and caught him, and in child's play pulled him in. And the baby Joe had prayed for brought about the mother's sin. 'Twas the same old wretched story that for ages bards had sung. 'Twas a woman weak and wanton, and a villain's tempting tongue. 'Twas a picture deftly painted for a silly creature's eyes, of the Babylonian wonders and the joy that in them lies. Annie listened and was tempted. She was tempted and she fell, as the angel fell from heaven to the blackest depths of hell. She was promised wealth and splendor, and a life of guilty sloth, yellow gold for child and husband, and the woman left them both. Home one eve came Joe the ostler with a cheery cry of wife, finding that which blurred forever all the story of his life. She'd left a silly letter. Through the cruel scrawl he spelt. Then he sought his lonely bedroom, joined his calloused hands, and knelt. Now, Lord, oh God, forgive her. For she ain't to blame, he cried. For I ought 'a seen her trouble, and 'a gone away and died. Why, a wench like her, God bless her, 'twasn't likely as her to rest with that bonny head forever on an ostler's rugged breast. And it was kind of her to bear me all this long and happy time. So for my sake, please to bless her, though you count her deed a crime. And if so be I don't pray proper, Lord, forgive me, for you see, I can talk all right with osses, but I'm nervous like with thee. Never a line came to the cottage from the woman who had flown. Joe, the baby, died that winter, and the man was left alone. Never a bitter word he uttered, but in silence kissed his rod, saving what he told his horses, saving what he told his God. And far away in mighty London rose the woman into fame, for her beauty won men's homage, and she prospered in her shame. Quick from lord to lord she flitted, higher still each prize she won, and her rivals paled beside her as the stars beside the sun. Next, she trod the stage half naked and dragged the temple down to the level of the market for the women of the town. And the kisses she'd given to poor OSTLER Joe for naught, with their gold and priceless jewels, rich and titled robes bought. Went the years with flying footsteps while her star was at its height. Then the darkness came on swiftly, and the gloaming turned to night. Shattered strength and faded beauty tore the laurels from her brow, and of the thousands who had worshipped, never one came near her now. Broken down in health and fortune, men forgot her very name, till the news that she was dying woke the echoes of her fame, and the papers, in their gossip, mentioned how an actress lay, sick to death, in humble lodgings, growing weaker every day. One there was who read the story in a far-off country place, and that night the dying woman woke and looked upon his face. Once again the strong arms clasped her that had clasped her years ago, and the weary head lay pillowed on the breast of OSTLER Joe. All the past had he forgiven, all the sorrow and the shame. He had found her sick and dying, and his wife he could now claim, since the grand folks who had known her, one and all, had slunk away. He could hold his long-lost darling, and no man would say him nay. In his arms, death found her lying. In his arms, her spirit fled, and his tears came down in torrents as he knelt beside her dead. Never once his love had faltered through her base, unhallowed life, and the stone above her ashes bears the honored name of wife. That's the blossom I fain would pluck today from the garden above her dust, not the languorous lily of soulless sin, nor the blood-red rose of lust, but a pure white blossom of holy love that grew in one green spot in the arid desert of Franzla, where all is parched and hot.